So politicians in America are upset about this thing called critical race theory, or let's just call it CRT for short. CRT is a body of research that examines the connection between racism in America and its laws and institutions. Now, right now, politicians are trying to make it so that critical race theory cannot be taught in school. Let's look at this short clip from Senator Ted Cruz.
Critical race theory says America is fundamentally racist and irredeemably racist. Critical race theory seeks to turn us against each other, and if someone has a different color skin, seeks to make us hate that person. Let me tell you right now, critical race theory is bigoted, it is a lie, and it is every bit as racist as the Klansmen in white sheets.
So let me get this straight. Politicians don't want us to teach about critical race theory in America because racism isn't what is racist. It's teaching about racism that is racist. Well, either way, a lot of politicians are upset because one of the fundamental components of critical race theory is to accept the fact that America is inherently racist. So let's ask that question, or let's rephrase that question. Do American institutions discriminate against African Americans for no other reason except race? So when does the discrimination of black people normally start in America? Some say as young as preschool. No, you heard me right. There was a study done by Yale University in 2016 about the effects of implicit bias in teaching. Teachers were given a laptop and had to look at a series of videos of children playing at a table. A black male, a black female, a white male, and a white female. Teachers then were told that they were being observed to see how well they could detect challenging behavior from these kids to a degree that they could even predict problematic behaviors before they even started. But what the teachers were told actually wasn't true at all. In fact, the study was looking at something different. The researchers wanted to determine that when given this prompt, how would that affect the observation patterns of these teachers? So it turns out when given this prompt, teachers spent the majority of their time specifically watching the little black boy, and they spent the least amount of time watching the little white girl. So the teachers spent more time observing this little black boy just because they assumed that he would be the problem. So let's take a look at some information collected by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. Specifically, let's look at the suspension rate of students within a given state. So if you look at the suspension rate for white students in Pennsylvania, it is roughly 3%. On the other hand, if you look at the suspension rate for black students in Pennsylvania, it is roughly 17%, meaning that the suspension rate for black students in Pennsylvania is 5 times higher than it is for white students, even though black people only make up 12% of the population in Pennsylvania. So after investigations, the office determined that when white and black students had violations such as dress code and school misconduct, that black students were just more likely to be suspended than white students were, and white students were just more likely to be let off with a slap on the wrist. So even when white and black students are problematic, it's more likely that black students will be punished and white students won't. So you wonder how these types of biases can affect people in the real world, especially when it comes to policing. I guess it's time to talk about stop and frisk. So stop and frisk was the police practice of detaining, questioning, and then searching civilians on the street. Stop and frisk averaged about 100,000 stops per year, with the height of it being in 2011. Of these almost 700,000 stops, 90% of the people that were stopped were black or Latino. So with all this blatant discrimination going on, you wonder to yourself, did anybody step in? And the answer is yes, but it didn't work out so well for that man. So an NYPD officer by the name of Adrian Schoolcraft decided to step in on the issue. Schoolcraft felt as though that the practices by the NYPD were a little too overboard, so he decided to voice his concern about the over-policing and the arrest quotas that were given by the NYPD. And like I said, it didn't end too well. It actually resulted in him being transferred to a desk job and him being admitted to a psychiatric hospital against his will. Schoolcraft eventually released tapes to prove that his claims about the NYPD were correct. So once this information is made public, you'd think that somebody would do something about it, right? The New York mayor at the time, Mike Bloomberg, when he was asked about the over-policing of the residents of New York, he basically stated that black people in New York were actually not being over-policed. It was related to the fact that black people are just more likely to be criminals. So do you now understand the importance of teaching critical race theory in schools? And I only chose to examine 2 American institutions, which was policing and education. From the research I presented, you see that African Americans face a level of institutionalized inequality based solely on the fact that their skin is black. And just like in the case with the police harassment that accompanied stop and frisk, even when these issues go into the light of day, nobody really cared. The highest political power in New York, which was the mayor, said it himself. He didn't really care because black people were criminals. So now it's a situation where American institutions not only unequally and unfairly treat African Americans, but the people that do benefit from these institutions want African Americans to not talk about it. You see the problem? but maybe I'm wrong.
They gon' play me now. They gon' play me now.